Israel launches a series of deadly retaliatory strikes on Gaza, hours after rockets were fired from the Palestinian enclave. The retaliatory attacks, which began on Monday night, mark a significant escalation in tensions in Jerusalem. They followed a day of heavy clashes between Palestinians and Israeli police inside the Al-Aqsa Mosque. Hundreds of people were injured when police fired stun grenades and tear gas at Palestinian demonstrators. Later, Israeli nationalists gathered for an annual march through Jerusalem's Old City to celebrate Israel's capture of East Jerusalem during the 1967 Six-Day War. Many Palestinians view the march as a provocation. The catalyst for the violence is Israel's plans to evict a number of Palestinian families from East Jerusalem to make room for Jewish settlers. For many, the evictions are just part of a wider trend.
It's a matter of a whole policy that has been targeting the Old City, targeting Sheikh Jarrah, targeting Silwan, and of course targeting Isawiyah and other places. And they have surrounded Jerusalem with enormous settlements, trying to extricate Jerusalem from its Palestinian environment.
The international community is now calling for all sides to de-escalate.
Well, for more now, let's bring in Yara Hawari. She's political analyst at the Palestinian think tank Al-Shabaka and a freelance journalist. Dr. Hawari, before we get into the underlying tensions here, tell us, how do you explain the current flare-up in violence?
I think it's very important that we look at the historical context of what's been going on in Jerusalem and really in Palestine. This is a context of ongoing ethnic cleansing of Palestinians and colonization of Palestinian land. And that the latest goings-on in Jerusalem is just one manifestation of that. The attempted eviction of Palestinian families from Sheikh Jarrah is really part of a larger attempt to Judaize Jerusalem and to push Palestinians out of Jerusalem. So the protests have really been in resistance to that ethnic cleansing and ongoing colonization. And they've been inspired by their brothers and sisters in Sheikh Jarrah who have been really remaining steadfast amidst this ethnic cleansing. OK, so you're putting this in terms of ethnic cleansing and the Palestinians responding to that. You mentioned the evictions as well in terms of what might be causing the current flare-up. But what prospects do you see for addressing the issues driving this conflict between Israelis and Palestinians? I think when the international community and actors are calling for calm and a de-escalation, they're really evading the responsibility that the Israeli state has, which is to end the occupation and colonization of Palestinian land. There is one aggressor in this situation. These are not clashes or skirmishes. These are violent repression of Palestinian resistance to that ethnic cleansing and colonization. So that context is incredibly important when we're thinking about possibilities for the future and possibilities to end the violence. It really lays in the hands of Israel. OK, so you're seeing this very much from a Palestinian perspective. In searching for a solution to the conflict, how much of an obstacle, though, are the divisions among the Palestinians themselves and their inability to even hold an election, for example? Well, you're right in saying that I'm seeing this from a Palestinian perspective as a Palestinian, but this isn't only a Palestinian perspective. International organizations and the UN have long identified Israel as an occupying regime and have condemned ethnic cleansing and evictions. So this isn't simply a Palestinian perspective, it's actually an internationally held perspective. Now, what's been remarkable about these protests... I would like you to talk about the Palestinians themselves, if you wouldn't mind, because absolutely. That's what I'm about to do. Could you speak to that? Thank you. Absolutely, yeah. The resistance and the protests that we've seen over the last few days, as I was saying, across historic Palestine is remarkable and really, really quite something to see, because Palestinians across the so-called Green Line are uniting under this banner of Save Sheikh Jarrah, which is actually really much larger than Sheikh Jarrah. It's about resisting ethnic cleansing across Palestine. And so we're seeing incredible scenes from Nazareth, from Haifa, from Ramallah, from Jerusalem, of Palestinians uniting under this banner of resistance against ethnic cleansing.
OK, so you don't really want to address the conflict between Hamas and Fatah, for example. But,
I can absolutely.
Well, let's move on to the new U.S. administration, because the U.S. has often played a role or tried to play a role as mediator in all of this. The Trump administration promoted Arab recognition of Israel, moved the U.S. embassy to Jerusalem, gave a nod to Israel's claim to the Golan Heights. What are your expectations for the Biden administration?
I think we're likely to see a continuation of US policy, which really appeases the Israeli regime. We might see a sort of a friendlier face. The Trump administration was certainly very crude and certainly very obvious in its support for Israel. But I don't think we'll see massive change in terms of US policy towards Israel. We know that the US has long been an ally of Israel and moreover has long been a donor of military aid to Israel. I don't see any changes in that in the days to come.
Dr. Hawari, thank you very much for talking with us. That was Yara Hawari from the think tank in the Palestinian territories, Al-Shabaka. Thank you very much.
Thank you.